Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. This is Rappler Talk. Between 1970 and 1996, armed conflict in Mindanao killed at least 120,000 people. In 2000, nearly 1 million were displaced during the government's all-out war, if you guys remember this, against the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, the MILF. Today, we're waiting for the Bangsamoro Basic Law. That's supposed to have been passed. It was one of the priorities of President Aquino, but it's delayed. What are the prospects for peace now, given this situation? If you guys remember, what really triggered it was Mama Sapano earlier this year. Joining us today is Lord Jack McConnell. He's a member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom. He knows about autonomy firsthand. He's just arrived from Mindanao, where he met with key MILF officials, other sectors involved in the peace process. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here. I guess this great backdrop.
So glad to have you with us, and I'm looking forward to your insights into this. How would you describe where we are today?
Well, I think we're at a critical moment,
Yep.
really. It's been a difficult year. Last year was a year of hope, the new agreement being signed, the comprehensive agreement, and it seemed a move forwards for Mindanao and for the Philippines as a whole. And obviously this year, certain incidents have at least provoked delays, maybe some questions about that process.
Yep.
And now you're in this critical pre-election period when politics and government's going to be dominated by that election, and
Right.
I think it's really, really important to keep the process going, because this is a real prize for the Philippines as a whole, not just for Muslim Mindanao. And I really hope that behind the scenes over the next few months, while all the election activities taking place, the real work is happening to make sure the whole agreement can be implemented by the next administration.
What's at stake for the Philippines?
Well, I think around the world today, we see all kinds of extremism causing all kinds of havoc and dismay and violence. And yet here in the Philippines, you have a group that have been involved in an insurgency for a very long time, very, very committed to a democratic solution, signed an agreement, willing to decommission, willing to give up their arms, and work for the better of the people in that area. And that's an incredible prize for the Philippines as a whole. It's not. I think everybody here in Manila should be celebrating this opportunity. I know that there are questions to be answered, but it's a massive opportunity for the Philippines as a whole to move on from that terrible violence of the past, and also to show the rest of the world that it is possible to find democratic solutions to these violent problems.
What insights did you get after meeting with the MILF?
Well, my view is I've met the MLF now 3 times this year,
Okay.
back in February and June, and then again today. And each time I have met with them, there have been challenges. Obviously, in February, it was in the immediate aftermath of Mama Sapano, and I thought the political leadership responded very maturely to that,
Right.
recognising the severity
Not
of
as
the
maturely
situation.
as the rest, actually far more maturely than the rest of our population, it seems.
Yeah, well, I couldn't possibly say that, but I think they behaved very maturely. They understood how serious it was and how the whole peace process
Hinged
could be
on it.
knocked off course by what had happened that day, and I was impressed by that serious approach. And then in June, there were big delays at that point to the BBL being passed in Parliament, and again, while they were frustrated, they were demonstrating patience and a long-term commitment no matter what to this process. And again this week it was the same. And I had a long discussion with the Transition Commission on Monday afternoon, all the discussions about how do we create the best functioning Parliament for the Bangsamoro area, all the discussions about the education and the economy being critical for the future of the area.
Right.
And then on Tuesday I spent a long time with the Central Committee, and the questions they were asking me were all about how do you make autonomy work in practice? How do we get through this?
And you certainly have first hand.
How do we convince the lawmakers here to take this a little bit more seriously? And I think they are. I've met these kind of groups all over the world. And this is a serious group of people who are desperately committed to peace and democracy. And I think the Philippines at a national level should seize this opportunity, because it's not only going to be great for the Philippines, but it could be a real example to the rest of the world as well.
Do you see political will in the government of the Philippines right now? Because one of the things, the aftermath of Mama Sapano has been the people themselves The Filipinos themselves seem
Yes.
to have lost their appetite. I look at the polls that we run on Rappler, minimum of 72% against it. How does this affect the policy and the ability to pass this law now?
I think that's an inevitable consequence of this year. I understand public opinion. After years of fighting,
Right.
It's understandable that people are nervous about these kind of solutions when agreement has been reached after negotiations that largely take place in private. But negotiations there have to be. There are 30,000 armed combatants
Right.
who are willing to lay down their arms in order to make this work. The situation in Muslim Mindanao is desperate.
Right.
You know, the young people are 3 times more likely to finish grade 5 at school in the Philippines, elsewhere in the Philippines, than they are in that part of the country. Women are 3 times more likely to have a midwife at their childbirth than they are in Muslim Mindanao. And I think to use that figure of 3 again, I think you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed as a youngster in that part of the country than you are in the rest of the Philippines.
And yet that's also
This
the
is
bread
desperate.
basket, right? That's also the bread basket
Well,
of the
potential.
Philippines.
I look around that area
Right,
as I drove
right.
around on Tuesday with UNICEF, and you know the place is lush. It's got incredible potential for tourism, for agriculture, and also for industry. The people there, I'm sure, would be willing to work hard and deliver for investors. So I think the prize is huge, but I understand the nervousness in the rest of the population. That's when the leadership's required here.
Right.
And I think if the international community, if all of us who care about this, can keep saying that we support this process, hopefully at a national level in the Philippines, then politicians will feel more able to show that leadership and to deliver on this. This is a massive opportunity, and to squander it
Right.
would be a tragedy for future generations.
Some of the politicians have said, why bother with a new law when we have ARMM? I'm sure you have insights into something like this because of your own experience in Scotland. I
Yeah.
mean, can you explain what the difference is between this and the way normal people can understand?
Well, when I first became involved earlier at the beginning of this year, I was quite surprised to find that there was already a body.
Right.
And I was like, what's the difference here? What's the problem? And there are huge problems. The existing, just to give you one example, the existing ARMM does not have an annual budget
Right.
that
Right.
they can plan ahead with, and they have absolute control over,
Right.
autonomy over. They have to go and bid for money from the central government departments, even when they have the policies and the plans in place. Any autonomous government that is working effectively anywhere in the world has its annual budget that it then decides how to spend, what the priorities are, and it can match the budget to its plans for development for the area. Any attempt at autonomous government anywhere in the world that doesn't have that fails.
Correct.
There are no examples in the world of autonomous government being successful doesn't have that annual budgetary responsibility. And the examples of the most successful autonomous governments at a sub-state level in the world do have that responsibility, and that's a key gap in the ARMM. Just one of many. Legislation is another problem. I think the form of parliamentary democracy in the regional legislative assembly, good hard-working people trying their best, but you need a proper parliamentary democracy function there as well.
Interesting.
And I think that if you put those building blocks in place, including a good relationship with the centre and a way of handling disputes and disagreements
Right.
and so on, then you would have a genuinely autonomous government that can be as successful as, for example, the government in Scotland has been over the years in delivering changes that are relevant to Scotland, solving Scottish problems, or the government in Catalonia and Spain, or and many other parts of the world, Quebec and Canada.
Yeah.
Lots of similarities. All of these governments are designed to solve local problems in ways that are appropriate for the local situation, and they need that chance in Muslim Mindanao as well.
In your meeting with the MILF leadership, what insights? I mean, I'm sure they were looking for guidance in terms of lessons you would have learned. I mean, what do you think was the best thing that you brought to them?
Well, one of the things I said to them this week, and I think they were very receptive to this, was that although a delay is frustrating for them, and I think it's a challenge to their leadership because their people will be restless.
Right.
They've been promised something here and there's now a
Yeah.
delay in Manila.
Absolutely.
But I said to them that I thought they should try and use that delay
To prepare.
Yeah, to prepare. And because they're going to have to govern that region at some point. If they're elected, if they are the majority and they are elected, they'll have to work with other forces, political forces, and they'll have to deliver well for local people. And they have to make a parliament work as well. They have to have the right committees and the right structures and the staff who can actually administer it properly. So there is time here for them to prepare even more effectively than they would otherwise do. And I remember in Scotland back in 1999, we kind of rushed the start of the parliament. You know, we didn't rush the we didn't rush the campaign. It took 20 years to get there.
Yes.
But when it came to the bit, the legislation was passed in 1998, and we elected the parliament in 99. And at the time, it felt exciting, but with hindsight, I think we all felt it was maybe a little bit rushed. And so I think there's a chance here for the MILF, because they are committed to making this a success, not failing, to use the time to prepare. And I think there's a big job to be done by the Transition Commission to use these months ahead, behind the scenes. Let all the election stuff go on, but behind the scenes be ready to give the new administration a proper package to say, you know, we need the Bangsamoro Basic Law, and it needs to be a proper, autonomous, devolved government and parliament for the Bangsamoro area. But we also need a strategy for decommissioning, we need a strategy for development and wealth sharing. We need all these elements. The comprehensive agreement is a comprehensive agreement.
So you see them working on this now? You see them working on this now?
I would like to think that they will have that opportunity as a result of the delay.
What happens if the Bangsamoro law fails to pass, or it is so watered down that it is not acceptable to the MILF?
Well, I think there's a huge responsibility here on the lawmakers. You know, I recognise this year's been difficult. So let's assume that either there is a rushed attempt to complete the process this autumn, or that it all slips into the new administration. Passing a law that is in line with the comprehensive agreement, that delivers genuine autonomy, is fundamental. And this is a serious agreement reached between the leadership of 30,000 combatants, the biggest group, but a leadership that has become committed to peace and democracy. An agreement between them and the sovereign government of the Philippines. And if and lawmakers have a duty to scrutinise that and to look into the detail, but they also have I think a duty to the nation to deliver on it as well.
So that is our best case scenario,
right? Oh, absolutely.
Our worst case scenario is that it doesn't pass, and what do you see happening if that were the case?
Well, I don't want to contemplate that possibility, because I think it is so serious.
Right.
You know, we only have to look at events around the world today, people being kidnapped and threats being made and all kinds of horrific violence, people being displaced in different parts of the world, in North Africa and the Middle East, and you know, even from Myanmar across the seas here, people running away from situations where their conditions are not recognised.
Right.
So you've got that combination of fleeing refugees, combination of violence, kidnapping.
Well, we're seeing that here in the southern Philippines, right? The kidnapping, right? Just recently, the 2 Canadians and the Japanese, the Filipinos.
So you've got an opportunity in this. Here you have a movement that has moved from being part of a violent conflict.
They actually did, right?
Yeah, and they you know, and they're not just saying. I've met them a number of times this year. They understand what they have agreed to, and they are strongly committed to the idea of a democratic parliament and to peace in the area, because they want to see development. They want to see these social conditions tackled, and to throw away that opportunity in a world where violent extremists are dominating elsewhere would be a catastrophic outcome to this.
This is also taking place in the context of ISIS. Growing strength of ISIS, both on the ground and on social media, reaching out to Southeast Asians, right? I mean, I guess in terms of how this connects to the global context, what forces do you see at play here?
Well, I think across Southeast Asia, there are examples of conflicts which are basically a challenge from a very strong historic identity in one part of the country, that feels disenfranchised, discriminated against, or whatever by the central government, by the nation. And that's true in southern Thailand, it's true here, it was true in Aceh in Indonesia, it's true in parts of Myanmar. And I think in Southeast Asia there is a real opportunity to recognise the nature of that conflict and to bring in forms of autonomous regional government that actually give people a chance to, not just to have a political voice and to have their own representation, but to take responsibility for their own problems. You know, autonomy is a two-way thing. It's not just that you have more rights.
Right,
you know,
right.
Being First Minister of Scotland was a great privilege, and it was very exciting, and it was, I had many rights and privileges in that position, but I also had huge responsibilities.
Yeah.
And the leadership of the Bangsamoro area, or in the future, the leadership of any devolved or federal structures in other parts of Southeast Asia, as the leadership in Aceh have found,
yes,
leadership comes with responsibility as well as rights, but it also means that you can solve those historic problems, or at least you can try in a way that's more appropriate for your people than perhaps is possible by central government. And so therefore I think this is it's not just an opportunity for the Philippines, but it is a signal to the rest of the world, because every other one of these conflicts that you just mentioned, if you look at the situation in Ukraine, in Eastern Europe, if you look at the situation around the Middle East, around Syria and Iraq and so on at the moment, if you look at the situation in North Africa, in Mali and elsewhere, again you've got these conflicts where a regional people feel distanced in some way from the centre. And they feel that injustice and poverty and all the other problems that come with it. And if the Filipinos can make this agreement work in the Bangsamoro area, what a signal to the rest of the world. You know, you should be proud of this. This is not an insignificant arrangement. This should be a matter of national pride. And you know, I really do hope that you pull this off, because I think elsewhere in the world people are looking and hoping, and will take hope from it if it does work.
Because the other alternative, I think, is grim, because if the law doesn't pass, the people who negotiated this, the leaders of the MILF, would lose credibility with their constituents. Would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, to slap them in the face after everything that they have conceded,
and they've acted exactly,
and the willingness that they have shown, and the hard work they're putting into this. Frankly, I mean, they're working day and night to prepare for this down in Mindanao, and I think it would be very difficult for them. Do they have a hold of the MILF has gone through the BIFF, or the Bangsamoro. BIFF has splintered off, BIFM, BIFF, whatever you want to call it. The Abu Sayyaf continues to, can they control this area? Do they still? I think, my sense is, and I don't want to over-exaggerate my knowledge of the situation here, because I can get a feel for it when I'm there, but I don't live in the community. But I've now been to Cotabato twice in the last few months, and and I don't hide in a coffee bar when I'm there. I'm out and about meeting people, and my sense is that people locally are desperately keen to have peace. And the leadership are, in part, the leadership themselves have become convinced of the need for peace and democracy, but they are also responding to that will of the people. And as a result of that, they are leading their forces in the right direction.
Interesting.
But they need to be able to show progress.
Correct.
It doesn't take a PhD in conflict to work out that if a group that was involved in a civil war comes to a negotiating settlement where they say, right, we're going to stop fighting and we're going to lay down all our arms, and we're going to go to work normally in this area, and we're going to have a democratic parliament, and we're going to stand for election, we're going to try and win votes, and then we're going to govern the country properly, the region properly. If they do that, and then they are let down by the other side in the negotiations, it doesn't take a PhD to work out what comes next.
In a far more dangerous world.
And
we were a training ground in the past, in the late 90s, for Al-Qaeda linked groups, and now the world has become even more dangerous.
Well, to put it in those terms, perhaps the Philippines could be the training ground for democratic solutions for regional internal conflict.
I like how you're always glass half full. That's very, very excellent.
What a fantastic opportunity.
Sure, absolutely.
To go in 20 years from being the training ground for Southeast Asian terrorists to the training ground for Southeast Asian Democrats. How good would that be?
So given that elections, though, you said this at the very beginning, elections are coming up, the filing of certificates of candidacy are next week, the legislators, the leadership, the political leaders, the administration, they're focused on elections. Is there enough focus on the peace process?
Well, again, I don't want to interfere in the internal election process in the Philippines, and people will have their standpoints and they'll have things to say. But I know from having fought elections from a position of leadership, there's always a temptation during elections to say things that are for the moment to win votes. And I do hope that all of those who stand for President and Vice President and stand for the Senate over these next few months bear in mind that there is a long-term prize at stake here, and don't say or do anything during the election that could cause difficulties afterwards. You know, I think the eyes of the world are going to be on them here, and I really do hope that they, by all means, campaign and compete for votes, but don't use this or exploit this situation for votes, because it's too important. And it's not just important for the MILF leadership or the laying down of arms. It's important for all those kids that are not finishing grade 5.
Right.
Or those mothers that are dying in childbirth, or their girls are, struggling because of their forced into early marriages, or all these other social problems that exist. It's these youngsters that matter here. Yep. And I would say to the national politicians, please have them in your mind whenever you think about making a speech or a statement during this election campaign.
I want to pull out big picture. What does the Philippines look like from the other side of the ocean?
Well, the Philippines has a great reputation around the world because Filipinos around the world are, the best of people, just friendly, hardworking, delightful people, special people, I think, actually, and all the more special because you are dispersed so much around the world. And I travel everywhere, and almost everywhere I go, I come across the Filipino expats, and I know that that's tough for a lot of them because they're sending money home and they miss their families. Everybody talks about missing their families and their country. This is a very family-orientated place. So I know it's tough, but they're great ambassadors. So I think the impression of the Philippines around the world is really strong and positive. But there's just always been this little question mark over, is it a violent place as well? I remember the guy who used to cut my hair back in Scotland used to come to the Philippines twice a year on holiday, and I remember every time I'd see him, I'd say, was it safe enough the last time you were there?
Right.
And there's always this little question mark in your head. Is that place just a little bit violent still? So I think if this conflict can be solved, then that impression of the Philippines can only get better. And at the moment, the Philippines at the moment is leading the way on inward investment in this part of the world as well. And
correct.
So the potential is here. People recognise that how hard-working and honest and responsible the people are, and international investors. The Philippines is pretty high up their list.
Yeah.
But think how much higher it would be if we could get this solved.
Wonderful. Last thoughts. Your last thoughts. Any last thoughts? For the people. So what's interesting about the elections coming up is 40% will be young. The people who are voting will be young.
Yeah.
It will also, I think, be our first internet influence. Could be internet driven, since 40%
that's going to be interesting because that's affecting elections.
Right.
And votes all over the world.
And power dynamics, correct, right?
And there's a general, there's a real there's a real feeling, I think, across the world that people are looking for new people with integrity and authenticity to lead their countries and lead their political forces and their institutions. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out here, because we've seen some unusual election results around the world over the last few years, and we maybe
India sparking us. It's interesting, all of the different things. Indonesia, Jokowi, correct.
And just in this area, you got an interesting result in India, an interesting result in Indonesia. Look at the situation in the United States just now with
we have elections the same day.
What appeared to be maybe 9 months ago. Looked like it was going to be definitely another Clinton versus Bush election campaign, and now it's all up in the air. Nobody knows who the candidates are going to be, and so I think it will be an unpredictable election. Although people think that Filipino politics is a bit predictable, I think it could be unpredictable.
I hope.
And I just hope that the candidates and people who are voting take a look around, and they can see the potential of this country, but they can see the problems that need solved as well. And for people who are living up the road here in shambolic housing situations, which are horrible, and which I've been through, and dangerously violent communities, or people who are living out in the rural area with the local school unfit for purpose and so on, and no access to health services. These are the people that matter in this election, and I hope the politicians and the people who are voting
keep that
think
in mind.
about those issues and not just the personalities.
I can't let you go without asking you these questions. I'm so sorry they came in slightly late, but this is from @TomTwitch91. This is on Twitter.
Right.
Is there anything you'd like to say to convince those who are against the BBL to change their minds?
Keep your eyes on the prize. That would be what I would say. I think it is an unusual thing in today's world to have a partner in a civil war who have publicly committed and demonstrated their commitment to peace and democracy, to decommissioning their arms, and to getting engaged in a genuine democratic solution that doesn't just give them power but actually shares power with the people. And that is a massive prize, and legislators in the Philippines should see it for what it is, not for what it might have been once.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lord McConnell. There are more questions. You have to tweet him. He is actually on Twitter at Lord McConnell. At Lord McConnell. You have been watching.
I give a commitment. If anybody tweets me with a question on this topic, I will answer the tweet.
He handles it himself.
I'll
tweet at Lord McConnell. We've been speaking with Lord Jack McConnell.
The hashtag Rappler Talk, of course.
Hashtag Rappler Talk. You're good, thanks. Peace process, peace in Mindanao. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you for watching.